Hello everyone, and welcome to Emerald Meadows, your YouTube channel for all things RC and sometimes quilting. And for the last couple of videos I've been doing quilting with my wife. And today we're going to be doing the table runner you see behind me. This is a joint project that my wife and I are going to work on. She's going to do one half, I'm going to do the other. So this video will be kind of as a quilt as you go, crazy quilt, kind of table runner instructions. Nothing too complicated, but we thought we would share what we did, and hopefully you'll gain some insight and techniques as to how to use this process. So let's get started. Okay, as we mentioned, we're going to be making our Crazy Quilt As You Go today. This is going to be our Crazy Quilt As You Go table runner. As mentioned in the introduction, this is a design that we've kind of amalgamated from different websites. But we thought we'd share with you how we plan to do this. We've started with our base fabric, and it's 42 inches wide. And you can see here, we've cut our base fabric into 1.5, 2, 2.5, and 3-inch wide strips. When we use these, when we use this layout, 20 of these strips will give you 40 inches of table runner. So you can judge accordingly to whatever length you want. I think we're going to be doing 80 inches, so we're going to be dealing with 10 of each of these strips. Randomly put together is going to give us 80 inches, but you can design however you want. Our width is going to be 18 inches, and what we do is, after we've cut all of our strips, we went to our scrap bin and we took some fabric, and we've cut random colors that are the same width as the fabric of our strips. So this is our base at the 3-inch, and we cut a 3-inch, in this case a 3-inch blue strip. Now, don't measure the length of it. The length is, this is kind of the nice part of it, is you're just going to take whatever length that you feel is appropriate. So this one here, I don't even think we measured. This here is 1, 2, 5, 6 inches. So that's a 6-inch strip that we plan to put into this 3-inch. And you can see here in the 2.5 we have green, again a different length. And we go down the line here and we have different colors that we're going to be piecing into each of these. And what you end up with is a long strip, such as this, with your color, the color or the accent fabric sewn into your pattern. And this is another example. Our table runner is going to be 18 inches wide, and this is obviously a lot wider than 18 inches. What we plan to do is, we plan to lay this out when we're done and try to put it together as to what we think looks right, and then simply cut each side off to the 18 inches. So this gives us some flexibility by moving this fabric back and forth to see what we think looks best. So as I mentioned, we simply just take our strips of fabric and we just pick a location, put it back here where you can see it better, take our cutter and cut it. Voila, and we're going to take our green piece and blue piece and sew it in. So now let's go to the sewing machine. Okay, here we are at the sewing machine. As mentioned in my other videos, this is my wife's old machine that she lets me use, which I take advantage of. Now we simply put the right sides together, and I'm using a walking foot. I find, for me, being a novice, the walking foot helps quite a bit. Put her down. We're using a gray thread, more neutral, and we simply change my stitch length a bit, and we simply sew down. As you can see, I'm not the best sewer. And we have it added to one end, and we take the other end of our base material and add it to the other side of our accent fabric. For the sides, we don't need to pin it, and we sew this down. Okay, sew that down like so. And we're going to iron this out, iron it flat, and we're going to do this 40 times for our table runner. So we're going to continue, and then when we come back, we're going to show you how we place them. Back from piecing all of our accent colors into our base fabric. As you can see on the design wall behind us, my wife and I put together all these strips, as I mentioned earlier, from the 1.5 to 2.5 and 3-inch wide base fabric, and then we simply put in our accent colors. We had 5 different accent colors of varying lengths that we've added into our fabric. So we end up with a fairly long piece of fabric. So now comes the crazy quilt time, where we're actually going to start laying these strips onto our batting. And we're not going to do it in any particular order. We just want to do it in such a way so that we don't have 2 colors right next to each other. And we're kind of going to go into a close-up to see, so you can see exactly what we did to the batting, so that we'll get ready to sew these pieces right onto the batting, as you do in Crazy Quilting, and show you how we kind of marked out our batting as we move forward. So let's move into a little bit of a close-up. So since we want our quilt to be, our table runner to be 18 inches wide when we're done, and we know that there's going to be shrinkage, we took our batting and we took a 20-inch wide batting strip, roughly to the length that we want our table runner to be. Made it a little bit longer. And then what we did is we marked lines along here, what we call registry lines, so that as we move through the quilt, I'm going to do one half and my wife's going to do the other half, so that as we progress down the quilt, we're going to be staying vertical rather than kind of going off on an angle as you move down. So these lines on here were just, we actually used a Sharpie, a yellow Sharpie, to make the lines. They won't show up when we're done, but the Sharpie has enough strength so that we can see this. And we also marked the lines on each side to give us our boundaries, which is the 18 inches where our fabric is going to lie. This way we can judge where we want our accent color to appear on the batting as we begin to sew it. So here we are at the machine getting ready to sew on our first piece, and you can see here, I think a little bit more clearly, our registration lines, this yellow line that goes all the way down to the fabric. And we put these on every 5 inches. You can do 5, 6, it doesn't matter, as long as they're evenly spaced. They're just to act as a guide as you move down the table runner so that you're staying vertical. For our first piece, what we're going to do is we're going to align our fabric straight up to that line, and we're actually going to pin the second piece, our fabric, on. So we're actually okay. Now that we've pinned our first piece on so that we can stabilize it, you can see this handy little tip here that my wife pointed out here, keeping these pin heads out on the right side so they're easier to extract as I sew along. So that's a good tip. So now I'm going to sew this down. I tend to go pretty slow as I move down on this first one. As you can see here, we pressed all of these seams down flat, so it makes it a little bit easier to sew. And when we put it together, there won't be a lump underneath the finished product. So we've sewn. We opened up each of the seams and pressed them down. Okay, that's number 1 done. And let's move on to the next one, and we'll finish off the rest. I think our iron is hot enough now, so let's press this down before we put our next strip on. And give that a new, looks like we have this here pinned here. Actually, I sewed that down by mistake. I'll have to undo that. I had that tail underneath when I sewed down the piece, so I will have to undo that part. Okay, so now we're ready for our next strip. Okay, now we're ready for the third strip. After we pressed that down, we just picked one of the strips that we thought looked nice. I'm not going to pin the rest of these down. I put a pin down where I'm going to start, but I'm going to just go down using, tacking it down with my hands as we move along down the fabric. So here we go. Okay, we're now finished with the third strip. I'm going to press that down, and we're going to continue on down both sides of the of our table runner until we're done, and we'll see what we do next. Okay, we're back from piecing all of our strips on using the flip and sew method. We've made this quite large, so it's a little over 5 feet, but it's going to shrink a bit when we wash it. So we mixed the colors up as to our own taste. You know, we tried not to have the same colors next to each other, but as you can see, it looks pretty good. Just using random placement of the different varying lengths, so it's a good looking fabric. We've now squared it off, and I want to talk about how we did that. I guess everybody, probably for a lot of people watching this, they know how to do it, but I'll tell you how we did it. Once we had our table runner done, we had a lot of jagged edges down each side. So what we did is we simply put a center line. You probably can't see it. There's a yellow center line. We use yellow because it's not going to bleed through the fabric and be noticeable. So we put in a center line right down the middle. And then what we simply did, is we measured 9 inches from each side, because we want an 18-inch wide table runner, which will probably be a bit smaller once it's washed. But we did measure 9 inches on each side from our center line, and then what we did is we simply cut off the excess on each side. As you can see, I had the reason why we have this here, some of the tails got sewn in. That was my fault, not being careful enough. But you get to see the good and the bad and the ugly. So now what we're going to do is we're going to be putting the backing on, and we're going to be using, we're not going to be binding this, hand binding. We're going to be using the pillowcase method. And what that involves is we simply take the backing and place it on the good side of our table runner with the good sides facing each other. So this good side facing up, and we're going to take the backing here. This is our backing fabric, and we're going to take the good side of this and place it face down. So we have the table runner, the backing of the table runner, the good sides facing together, and what we're going to do is we're going to sew. We're going to pin this down in place, and then we're going to sew about 1/4 inch all the way around the edges, leaving about a 5-inch opening so we can turn it right side out, and then we're going to actually start our quilting process. We're going to continue. We're going to use a tip that we received from Sewing with Nancy in order to make the, when we turn the unit inside out, we want to have nice square corners. And what we're going to do is we simply fold the fabric over at the corner right along the seam line, and we continue now sewing in the next direction. So when we turn it inside out, we'll have a nice crisp corner that you'll see when we actually do this process. Okay, we've finished sewing around the edge of our table runner, and we've left our little opening here so that we can turn it right side out, and that's what we're going to do next. And we're going to use our handy dandy corner poker outer. I don't know where this came from, The other thing you can use is, my wife uses a crochet hook. So both of those are what we're going to use to turn this right side out. And we simply just reach inside and start pulling it out. I start in a corner and start pulling it right side out. And as you saw before, by doing that little, I guess a rollover in each of the corners, you'll find that these come out really nice and square. Better than it would be if you didn't do it. So definitely a good tip. And this came from Nancy probably years ago. Okay, now we got that all sewn out and edged. That's our backing using the pillowcase method. And now what we're going to do is we're going to press that out, and we're actually going to press this opening down a bit. And my wife's going to hand sew it. I don't hand sew it, but she does. She's a believer in it. I've done this before, and I've actually just used my machine and just gone straight over top of it. So we're going to press this out, and we're then going to hand sew this opening closed, and we're going to start getting ready for quilting. We don't want the backing to show on the front, so when we press it out, we want to make sure that we press it on the right side, and we press towards the edges so that the backing won't show, so you don't get kind of this little margin of backing color around the outside. So you can do that when you press it. We will also be sewing around the edges at some point. That's going to stop actually the backing at some later time, rolling back over so you see it on the front. So now we're straight stitching around the edge of the table runner before we start our quilting process. This is just to hold our edges from rolling over as we move through the process. And we're going to go around the whole table runner with a straight stitch, and we'll just continue along. Okay, now we have the quilt turned right side out, and we've stitched around the edges to keep everything in place, because if you don't, you could roll the fabric and the back will go to the front and the front will go to the back. So this just kind of holds everything in place. Okay, now we're going to be stitching in the ditch with our decorative stitch, and you can just choose anything that suits your fancy, and we're just going to be going right along all of these join lines. We're going to be using for ours, we're going to be using black thread. We did a bit of testing and we found that highlights it the best on the front, and we're using gray on the back, which we thought looked good. It's always helpful to try out a few threads when you're going to be quilting your top, because sometimes what you think will look good doesn't look good at all. So we practiced with a few different stitches and a few different colors, and that's what we decided on. Okay, so when we get back, we will have all the stitching done. No need to show you, we're just going to be straight stitching down, and we will show you the final product when we're done. Okay, we're all done the table runner. As you can see, we did our stitching in the ditch. It looks pretty good. My wife's half and my half are slightly different because we use two different machines, but I don't think anybody's going to notice the difference. We use the black on the top, and we'll just take a zoom in and take a closer look at this. So we now use the black on the top part, kind of gives us a nice accent. And on the back we used a different color of the gray, which is going to make this a fairly reversible looking table runner. We hope you enjoyed these videos, and if you liked it, say like, and if you would like to subscribe, click on subscribe, and we'll see you next time in Emerald Meadows. Have a good day. Goodbye.